Welcome to Berlin, Germany, host of the play-in stage. It's time for the first elimination day here at Worlds 2019 as two teams will end their tournament here. The stakes are high right from the start as Clutch Gaming and Unicorns of Love are fighting to take the lead in Group A. You can see Clutch and Huni taking to the stage in just a moment. Hello everybody and welcome to Worlds Countdown. I'm Quickshot, joined by Ejim and VODs, a South African, an Aussie, and a Welshman. There will be rugby talk today. I hope you guys do some reading up.
Love rugby. just personally, yeah.
What are we supposed to do with that, Quickshot? Outside of the fact that Wales is winning everything right now, I'm not really sure what's left to be said.
The Welsh beat the Aussies. Are you surprised?
Oh,
by the way, Bryce doesn't watch rugby.
So surprised.
Australia, take his passport back. Seriously. Yeah, there we go. So before we jump back into Groups A and B, let's get a recap of the action that happened yesterday. The big topic that I would like to talk about and start with is the LCK's number 3 seeded team, Damwon Gaming. They went 2-0. That was expected. The way they went 2-0, to me, was not expected. So, VODs, what's your read?
So I think that it was going to always be about the solo laners. Nuguri and Showmaker, expectations were high on these two players, and many thought that the bot lane could be exploited. However, what we didn't expect was for them to be exploited this early on in the tournament. The fact that they were losing in the 2 versus 2, the fact that they were getting caught out of position was very surprising, and a lot of the weight had to fall onto the responsibility of the two solo laners throughout the games yesterday.
Yeah, and I think that's very an honest answer, right? They have underperformed somewhat, but a lot of people are forgetting this is a super young rookie roster. They're coming from Challenger all the way to Worlds in a single year. Young players coming through. Like, if they falter a little bit at the start, they can still make a great progression towards the end of the tournament.
And I think that's really important to note as well, because Frosk was telling me about how the LPL teams bring their own food to these events because they're used to not liking the local cuisine. And we heard from Damwon yesterday saying, does anyone know where we can get some Korean food, please? Because we're struggling. And it's something that they are having to experience going to a different country, playing in a different environment. And it's better that they have these experiences now rather than in the group stages, and they can still perform at a decent level to get through.
All right, we'll see how Damwon can bounce back. Of course, they were in a group with Flamengo. I was super stoked to see BRTT back on the stage. Flamengo and BRTT, they put up a good fight against Damwon, but it was really the second game of the day on Draven when he popped off.
And it was just poetic, right? BRTT coming out, having a monster performance in exactly the way the Flamengo like to play the game. And the crowd, like, honestly, we're here in Berlin. The crowd is just popping off the entire time. The interview during the game, everything that was happening was just going their way.
Guy took his shirt off. Very enthusiastic.
Same thing. Apparently, there was about 15 to 20, like, Portuguese-speaking or Brazilian fans that live here in Berlin. We were asking our, like, events team, where are the fans from? Somebody's like, well, they're all from Berlin except one. He's from Munich. But, like, genuinely, the Flamengo fans came out in force. It was great to see them. Do we think it's going to be Flamengo as well as Damwon that advance from the group?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Because, but I mean, Flamengo definitely looked good when they were given their comfort picks. So the big debate is, what happens when they don't get those same comfort picks? Can they look as confident? Do they stand a good a chance against Royal Club once again? I don't know.
You didn't actually answer the question.
Yeah, because I don't know the answer, Quickshot.
Okay.
So I did some clever analyst desk thing where I, like, don't really answer the question.
Just
say clever stuff and move you forward.
I'm not letting you get away with that. We will get back to that group tomorrow. Let's talk about Group C really quickly, who also played yesterday. Much messier games, a number of mistakes actually across all 3 of the teams. So, Ejim, what would you take in Group C?
Yeah, I think super scrappy, in all honesty. Like, Mega getting the victory yesterday was surprising for me. I feel like the LMS and the VCS representatives may be underperforming slightly and just very, very scrappy all across the board.
I was overall disappointed with the group. I expected at least a little bit more, and we saw so much chaos. We saw many poor plays that I think that the other teams in the groups that will be moving into the best of 5s will want either both the first or second seed from this group, because right now they look like the best matchup to secure a spot in the World's Group stage.
I mean, that's so important to note. We do get to the double best of 5 days, play-ins, knockouts on Monday and Tuesday. The draw for those knockout matches will take place on Saturday evening. And Ejim, if your groups A, B, or D, do you share the sentiment? You want to pull one of these guys?
Yeah, 100%. The only really big thing is that they are wild-cardy. Like, they're playing weird stuff. They brought out the Pantheon for the first time, which isn't necessarily weird, but it was left open. You see the Quinn kind of all all over the place. These are early game skirmish teams that in the past can make runs, but given the way they did it yesterday, I'm not expecting super strong performances.
Pantheon, 100% ban, and we're not 100% win. That's all I'm saying. When it comes to Worlds, pros will use the big stage to show off mechanics or big brain decision making. Then there's going to be the players that put on a show just to say, I'm helping. This is presented by State Farm. In their win over Royal Youth, Shrimp delivers a perfect kick right into BRTT's stand aside for a perfect chain of crowd control.
Single mistake. We have seen Baron's throne at this tournament, but okay.
Shrimp now moving in closer, just instantly taking out the Draven. Now spots out Pilot. They've seen him in the jungle, and now BRTT is on the hunt. Tolerant is not a threat. He does not have a lantern. He will not get a chance. Now trying to get it out to safety. The double kill for Shrimp.
I'm ulting.
Nice. Okay, nice.
Look here. River.
Yeah. I'm fine.
I can't go.
Okay. Thanks,
Nice.
Shrimp. Thanks.
Nice, I keep kill. Okay.
Nice.
Push.
That's my boy.
Yeah.
That's my boy, caralho.
And it's BRTT, it's Draven, and they don't give him the damn kill. Lee Sin at the end hits him with the E. You're kicking him towards the 80 carry.
But Lee Sin deserved it.
Yeah,
he kicked him, and then he knocked him out of the way of his Q.
The chain CC was there.
The I'm helping, I thought was BRTT knocking him out of the way.
Just-
It's a guaranteed Lee Sin kill.
Let him right-click. It's fine. That's all he needs.
I was watching the player cams, and I love seeing BOTT interacting with the crowd. I mean, it helps when you have like half
Yeah.
of Brazil imported to watch the show, right? We're definitely the show, man. And I think after watching that play and seeing some of the energy we have here in the State Farm analyst desk, I think it's the perfect time to gauge the validity of these completely reasonable, fair, justifiable, defendable statements in the first ever World's edition of Overreaction. So I'm going to say a statement, and I would like my analyst to respond to my statement, all right? And the first one is, Echo is bad.
Accurate. I completely agree. Yeah, that's a great statement. That wasn't an overreaction whatsoever.
No. Just straight up. This champion is good. He's being heavily misexecuted. Like, in terms of what we've seen behind the scenes, there's a reason it came out on the first day and everybody is prioritizing him. But when you're looking for, like, the early game dives, this clip is not it. But if you're trying to play the punish style of League of Legends that we are seeing from a couple of these teams, then Echo is not the pick. Just play towards the Echo in the way you draft him, then you can look successful, but so far hasn't been the
Sounds
goods.
like he's saying Echo's bad.
I know, right? Because
That's
when
what
you
it
think
sounds
about
like.
it, it's like in the wrong hands, Echo is kind of bad, don't you think?
So
I
if
mean,
you pick a champion and play it poorly, you lose. Like, surprise, surprise.
I'm just saying, I think that Echo in the jungle is supposed to do what Sylas did, right? But I think that he's a slightly worse version of Sylas, but the idea is there. The problem is, I agree with Ejim in the sense that too many teams try to play him in the way in which you play like an Elise or a Gragas, but I feel that you need to have more of this Sylas mentality of scale a little bit more, get those items, but regardless of that, I still think that he's not a champion that fits into all comps. His crowd control is unreliable. His skill shots do not land as easily as you want them to.
And what I'm hearing the summary from my analysts, and no unquestionable terms, is Echo's bad.
Yeah, Echo's pretty bad.
The next overreaction that I have, Mammoth is the best OPL team in World's history, period.
I've got nothing against Mammoth. They've played two
here's a-
games.
hang on,
They've won a single game. They've lost a single game. We're 2 games deep in the tournament. By all rights, they could be, maybe if they make it out of play-ins, but in the past 2014, 2015, OPL has sent 2 representatives to be in the final series best of 5 to potentially make it to the next stage, to the Worlds. Like, we're at group
thing is,
stage. We're 2 games deep. You cannot say that.
We're 100% aligned, right? Like, number 1, number 2, we're on the same page here. And I also think Mammoth's support is the best Oceanic support that we've ever seen,
I think
right?
so. I think so. And I mean, when we look about
Ejim,
it,
would you agree with that?
when we think about it, UOL beat Clutch, and Mammoth then beat UOL. And I don't think any other OPL representative can say the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think objectively speaking,
That's fact.
they're the strongest.
Fact.
Yeah, that's okay.
Oceanic-
You know,
never sense.
Oceanic fans, raise your koalas because Mammoth is the best, and Ejim said so. All right, the last one. Splyce is the best team in play-ins. Come on, you've agreed with me for 2 out of 2.
Okay. So like they look good, but you've also got to remember that the context of the group that they're in means that they will naturally look better because I do not feel that their competition is particularly anywhere near the level of what Splyce is at. So I feel like if Splyce were in a different group, maybe they'd be challenged a little bit more. But I feel like it's important to look at it from the context of the other group and the group that they're in.
This is just classic, like we're in the Berlin studio, classic EU propaganda, like just, like, no.
So you're not agreeing with me?
No.
That stats-wise, they're the best. They got the best win time.
Oh.
Like all of the stats on paper, they're just the best team.
Yeah, stats on paper is what League of Legends is. You know, you talk to a pro player, they're like, oh yeah, they know all the numbers. That's everything the game comes down to.
I'm a master of stats, Jim. You will
I've heard.
All right.
I've
Look,
heard.
today it is time for day 3 of Worlds 2019 as the teams in Group A and B are fighting for a spot in the knockout stage. You can see the 6 games, regularly scheduled games we have. Tiebreakers are first going to be solved by game score, then by head-to-head. If 2 teams are tied in game score and head-to-head, they will play a tiebreaker game. If all 3 teams in a group are tied in game score and head-to-head, then 2 teams with the longest win time will play first, with the loser finishing last in their group. The winner will then play the team with the shortest win time to determine who's first and second seed going into the knockouts. A maximum of 4 games will be played, and if we do have those tiebreaker games, they will be played after the 6 regularly scheduled ones. Is there any particular matchup you guys are excited about, maybe VODs?
Well, I think that the matchup between Mammoth and Unicorns of Love will be extremely important today. Last time, they were able to get the better of them, and if they can do that again, they put themselves in a great position to be able to move through the play-in stage. And I also think that it should be a different game seeing as well, so I'm looking forward to that one.
All right, both of these teams have had a full day to prepare and try to adjust from day 1, so let's talk a little bit more about the teams that are hitting the Rift today, starting with the hometown favorite, Splyce. We'll try dial back the propaganda. Our Australian representative. Look, they are the heavy favorites in the group. They looked fantastic on day 1.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like they're bringing out the classic Splyce champions, Xerxes on the Hecarim, and they get to play the Splyce game, which I think is incredibly important, right? Dead FM and Isurus aren't the most proactive teams in the tournament so far, and when you are the 3rd seed representative from EU in this group, they are looking very good.
I think what's really important for EU fans is that Splyce at the end of the regular season were our 3rd best team. They also had a number of players in the All-Pro list, such as Xerxes and Humanoid. And I feel like those 2 players specifically have been stepping up alongside the primary star of the team in Kobe. And it feels like that while Vizicachi is still doing many Vizicachi things, like dying 1v1 at level 3, maybe getting caught out on a side
comes back in a CS lead afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, we're seeing a revitalized Splyce that do not seem fatigued like they did in playoffs.
Yeah.
They're looking clean, they're looking good, and they're only continuing to improve the mid-game weaknesses that have plagued them for so long.
It helps when you got a 5,000 average goal lead across 2 games at 15 minutes, you know? You looked at some of the stats, it is impressive, it is important to note, as you've already alluded to, Vedius, the competition in the group, of course, you know, Isurus Gaming and Detonation Focus Me. These 2 teams are now going to be fighting for that 2nd seed. So what do you want to see out of those 2 teams today to see who can come out on top and make it to knockouts?
Well, I think that Isurus as a team have underperformed considering our expectations. We heard Spawn at the beginning of the tournament talk about how he thought that Isurus could even finish the top of this group, and that's how high the expectations were for this team, but the players have not lived up to the hype. We have not seen the teamwork from them, and I feel like we just need to see a bit of a reset for this team because the day 1 Isurus that we saw is not the same as what we expected.
Yeah, absolutely, and a reset is absolutely it. Some of the veteran players, Oddie's been very vocal on social media that like, he was making tweets like, yes, I solo lost us that game. I couldn't land a Gragas cast, the Lee Sin Q, stuff like that. So it is very important for Isurus to take a step back. They've had a single day and come back here to play.
Well, we'll see how Group B plays out. Let's turn our attention to Group A now. Clutch, Mammoth, and UOL. All 3 teams 1-1. By transitive properties, we can't figure out who is the best team in the group. But obviously, Clutch are the heavy favorites. Their Game 2 performance versus Game 1, Ejim, was a marked improvement.
Yeah, huge juxtaposition as well. Game 1, like, they lost fairly early. Huni was going super aggressive at the top side, wasn't backed up by Lyra, and they were getting punished by their opponents. And then DeMonte in the interview is saying, we just want to play the safe game. Maybe it's not the most optimal, but being the NA seed in the play-ins, they're like, let's just dial it back a little bit. And you could critique that and say, well, it took them a very, very long time to close out that game versus Mammoth, but it really never looked like they were going to lose it. So if they can continue that, then maybe they come out of 4-0.
Yeah, and I think that the other teams should be a little bit more afraid of Clutch as well, because I think that they recognized quite quickly what went wrong for them. I think that hubris got the better of them and they were too overconfident coming into the tournament. And now that with a little bit more restraint, I think that they should be looking to draft similarly to how they did against Mammoth. And I think the responsibility falls on the likes of the Unicorns of Love and Mammoth to be the proactive players, the teams that actually want to get in your face, make early game things happen. And I'm a little worried that Mammoth might not be able to live up to that expectation.
So then who do you think will actually do it? Based on what you've seen in the 2 games, we presume Clutch will be taking the top seed. So it comes down to Mammoth versus UOL for 2nd seed. And what will be the deciding factor, Vedius?
Well, Ananasik is the difference maker for me. I feel like junglers are a key part of what is determining the outcome of this group. And I think that Ananasik, while a bit of a wild card at times, is someone that is not afraid to stick to his style of being aggressive in the early game. I like it when we see him on champions like the Rek'Sai. We saw what he was able to do against Clutch in game 1. And when you look at his performance during his regular season, it was all about getting in the enemy jungle's face, trying to deny as many camps as possible, being as proactive as possible, and setting up for his team for success. So I think that he will be the difference maker that take UOL into the knockouts.
No. It's the big, fluffy elephant. It's Mammoth. I think get away from the Karma top. Fudge is coming in. He's like a rookie to world scenario. Just give him the comfortable stuff that we have seen Mammoth play. And they've had a hugely like variant sort of performance right now. Very good game number 1. Very, very bad game number 2. If they can come back and actually play their style, I think they can see some success here.
Now the question is, how much faith do you have in the Mammoth team and players for the first time on stage as the best ever OPL team ever to actually make those adaptations and come in and put up a strong fight against Clutch, but more importantly to take down UOL?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is how they like to play the game, and I don't think it's easy. They're not a quick team, and they're by far not the quickest in the OPL, their domestic league, and then going up into Clutch and UOL, it is a very differing style that they have to adapt to, but I think UOL and Clutch specifically, not the most reliable with a gold lead, and that's something that Mammoth have to attack, right? They're a very smart team. They have like a very good carry players. Their bot can play very negatively, and their jungle isn't super proactive, and they're not like the best things to deal with.
He's invisible.
Yes.
He played Nocturne, and he ganked twice in 20 minutes. I can play jungle Nocturne, and I can gank more often. His ultimate, you can do lane ganks, you can gank from River, you can gank from Raptors, you can gank from wherever you want, and he didn't do anything. Like, this guy has been less proactive than, like, all of the junglers. There's a bad reference. I don't know what I'm talking about.
And I'm not debating that.
Landed at the end.
Yeah, I'm not debating that, right? That game, by all means, is an utter train wreck. Do nothing for 35 minutes isn't how you win League of Legends.
No.
It has to come before that point.
Right.
But they should realize that.
I'm going to put you on the spot, and I need to know your Group A predictions for 1st and 2nd, Vedius.
Clutch, Unicorns of Love.
Clutch Mammoth.
Clutch Unicorns, Clutch Mammoth. I cannot wait to see which of my analysts is going to be correct. Obviously, there's going to be a bunch of players to watch today. And Vedius, you've taken a look at some of the studs and duds from Groups A and B.
Yes, I certainly have. That means I'm going to need the space to talk about them. Thank you very much, Ejim, for providing it to me. Now, I wanted to start off by talking about Xerxes. This is, of course, his first ever World Championship. And in his debut performance, he brings out the Hecarim and dominates on it. During the regular season, Xerxes was the man that got Splyce their early game leads, and he's continuing to do that here on the international stage. With a young player that's full of confidence and ready to prove himself, he's showcasing why he is one of the best performing junglers here in Europe and what he's very capable of. Our next big stud is, of course, Fudge from Mammoth. You already heard Ejim talking about him, and I have high expectations for this top laner, even if I don't expect them to make it out of play-ins. This young gun rookie has showcased a lot of talent already in his first 2 games, outplaying 2 different tower dives against 2 different teams. This guy has revitalized and brought a new flavor to this Mammoth roster that has done a lot to help them succeed and potentially create upsets on the international stage. Now, finally, we have to talk about a dud, and that is, of course, Seros. Now, this man debuted Nocturne mid lane on the international stage. My expectations were high. I thought that the Heimerdinger and Ziggs player that was known for his creative and innovative picks would be able to show off what this champion was capable of. And then he rushed Black Cleaver. He followed that up by trying to build Static Shiv, and I couldn't help but feel disappointment. This champion has so much more to showcase, and Seros, he could not do it for me. So while he did disappoint me, he can look to redeem himself in today's games. And given that game 1 is just minutes away, we wanted to hear from the Unicorns of Love coach, Sheepy.
Thank you very much, guys. Laure here, and I am joined by Sheepy this morning. It's so nice to see you again in the studio. How glad are you to be back in Europe?
I'm so happy, really. I've had so many reunions with great people that I've met before, and I have some, experience to share from my 3 months in Moscow. So everybody's really ecstatic, and especially with Unicorns of Love, it's obviously the best.
I mean, basically, you had to leave Europe to make it to Worlds, right?
Yeah, we went the indirect way, but it's really great. We have this full support from Russia, but even everybody in Europe is super supportive. So yeah, I'm super happy.
Anyway, I feel like you had a good day 1, maybe not the one you were expecting. The group is really open right now. Every team is 1-1. And then Nasik said you got lucky against Clutch, then you lost against Mammoth. So how do you see things shaping up for day 2?
Well, Anna is a really funny person. I think that we have a really good chance to come out of the groups either first or second place.
Okay.
We have shown already that we can beat Clutch, which I think that everybody considers to be the stronger team. And even against Mammoth, from our experience, we feel that we can beat them. So obviously we go in with high expectations. Even if we fail, then it kind of, what can you do? But I do think we have what it takes to win.
And you want to give it your best try. Can you tell me what are just the strengths of Unicorns of Love coming in today against these two teams? Because you played against both of them now.
I think that our strengths are that if we know what to do, we seem really unstoppable. I think we have seen it in game 1 against Clutch Gaming, where we felt very proactive. I think that not once in this game it really seemed like we were not in control about the game. Compared to game 2 against Mammoth, where it seems like we didn't really know what to do and we just got, killed in team fights. So I think if we know what to do, we seem like one of the strongest teams.
Well, that's great to hear. Then how did the players feel after day 1 and how do they feel today as they want to qualify?
Yes, I mean, they are super excited as well. It might possibly be the last day, right? So you're always going in with the mentality that you want to do your best. I think that's the beautiful thing about Worlds as well. So yeah, stakes are high, everybody understands that, but we are like a family in Unicorns of Love, so I think we're all holding together and we'll manage to do it.
Oh, great spirit, as always. Thank you very much, Sheepy, and good luck today. And back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Laure and Sheepy. Group A is wide open going into today's matches, and Sheepy and Unicorns of Love can take a very big step towards that knockout stage with another win over Clutch. Now, let's talk a little bit about some expectations coming into this one. One of the things we haven't touched on yet today before we dive into the match intro is the meta, because we saw groups A and B very heavily prioritizing that Echo. It didn't work. Yesterday, it felt like Renekton was sort of the flavor pick of the day, and I think Renekton's 1-5 right now. We also saw play by Clutch. What are our expectations? Do we think that'll pivot? Do we think that'll change?
Yes.
I think Vedis, I asked him the Echo question. He's like, yeah, I think Group C and D watched A and B and went, no, move on.
So I think that Clutch have come on. Well, it was actually. Okay, I have to reset because I had a great conversation with Ejim earlier in the day about how when you're the better team, there is less responsibility for you to be the proactive team in the early game because you know that you can outplay your opponents later on. So if you go for more of a scaling late game style of play, you can force your opposition onto more of an early game focused style, which means that Unicorns would have to, in this situation, be the more proactive team. There's more responsibility to make the dives happen, play for the objectives. And that is inherently harder to do because if you mess up the execution against a team that scales better, then you just better enable them. So I think coming into today, Clutch's mentality will be that, which is that we know we can play better League than they can, or at least we believe we can. So instead, we'll draft more of a scaling option rather than first pick the Renekton, go for the Echo, and instead we'll just play more of the scaling style and just outplay them later.
And I think there's almost an even bigger conversation to be had about like meta and where these teams come from, because a lot of the emerging regions come into Worlds, MSI play-ins, being super dominant, and then get challenged by opponents that are comparable, and then they get kind of flustered, and you see differing things happen. And it is kind of super interesting to look at the win rates, red side versus blue side. It's like 2/3 red versus 1/3 on blue side. So is it like more flexibility in the draft? You get the counter picks for all these regions that do like to play aggressive in the early game, double solo lane counter picks, and that is sort of the way they want to attack the games early.
Well, I want to turn our attention back to the matchup at hand, because the first time Clutch and UOL played, the early game jungler that Ananasik actually played absolutely carried that performance. I know Vedis has had some very strong words about Lyra's performance thus far. far, and that could be the way that UOL can look for the 2-0 against Clutch today.
Yeah, I think that Ananasik, we talked about him earlier on, and he is a player that I think, at least in his very first game, demonstrated what he's capable of and how he is willing to take risks, but also he is what makes things happen for the Unicorns of Love. And we talked about how if Clutch assume that they're the better team and want to go for scaling, this is the one variable that you have to account for, because Ananasik will take those gambles, will look for fights, and will create opportunities for UOL to capitalize on.
Yeah, and I think absolutely, you mentioned it, he is almost necessary to the way they like to play the game. A big name, I guess, on this roster is Edward, that a lot of people will recognize, of course, and if those two link up, they have similar play styles. I think Ananasik been much more successful recently in doing that, but in terms of UOL's like victory patterns, it really does rest on the shoulders of this one man.
Yeah, it absolutely does, especially after seeing some of the decision-making that Edward had on day one. There is some room for improvement, we'll put it that way. But look, against Mammoth, though, Ejim, Clutch bounced back, and Clutch looked fantastic against them. So, you know, Mammoth obviously dropping the ball, you talked about it, was a fairly long game.
Yeah.
This has to make you worried if you're UOL or Mammoth, seeing the development that Clutch made on the same day, just a few hours apart.
Yeah, and how big it was, right? It was a very big difference in the style of game they played, and the big question for me is like what Clutch actually shows up. Not in terms of performance, but what they choose to do, because we've seen the slow stuff versus Mammoth, who can be and is a very slow team in the early game. Like, do they want to do a similar thing versus UOL, and that gets them punished by a Hail of Blades, Rek'Sai, and Ananasik, or do they actually play the same sort of style that they played versus UOL the first time and just execute it a little bit better?
And I also think it's important to remember that the matchups are very different as well. We talked about how Babip did not gank, really, for the first 20 minutes of the game. Whereas you compare that to Ananasik, this guy was constantly making plays. And the big question is, again, how does Clutch choose to approach this game? Because do they go for that slower style? Do they go for the more controlled? Or do they go high aggression, high fast pace, put Huni in a position to try and be that big carry?
Look at the man on your screen, because I think I actually have an answer to that question. What do Clutch want to do? What pace do Clutch want to play? Pay careful attention to the stats of Huni giveth and Huni taketh with a little tear of the goddess. And Huni, could you answer Vedius's question?
I've been playing like this like 4 years. You know how am I gonna just changing it? And I already proved that how I'm playing is like it's not wrong. Like I made the finals, worst final. I mean I won like LEC 2 times. I won LCK. I won MSI. So for sure, like probably the people need to follow me, not like I need to slow down.
Hold on, I'm looking, is there a microphone anywhere here? I just want to give it to Huni to drop. The best I can do is a banana.
Yeah.
So that banana drop right there.
Banana has been dropped. Well, what can I say? This is what we're going to get from Huni. And I mean, but again, notice the difference. Game 1, the top laner had a jungler that prepared and counter-ganked. Game 2, Fudge played 1v2 on a Karma. So like, context is important. And I think that if the expectation is this is what Huni's going to do, then UOL are just like, well, okay, we will welcome you with open arms and we will take those free kills.
But I will say, like, I kind of agree. League of Legends is getting quicker. Gone are the days of like perfect play. Let's just chill, sit back, wait for them to make some mistakes and then punish. Like, it's fun as a player. It's more fun to watch as a viewer. And like just forcing errors, I think personally is the best way to play the game. Like it's speeding up the G2, IG winning internationals. Like it's the goods.
Personally, I do agree. I think it is the better way to play League of Legends, but there's also an element of higher execution that is required on a more consistent basis.
Because the risk
it's inherently risky,
Yes. And so when we look at the G2s and FPXs of the world, and Damwon to a large degree as well, they are teams that will often, or at least during the regular season, take risks and they make it look seamless. And when Clutch attempt to do that, often it feels like Huni is the only one that takes those risks more often than not. And maybe he needs his team to follow up more. Maybe he needs to pick better situations to make those decisions. Either way, we often see some misalignment between Huni and his team.
How dare you question the man that has won MSI, made World Finals,
two-time LEC,
two-time LEC,
ran the gauntlet in LCS.
I absolutely, that's one of my favorite clips ever, and I'm really glad we got to hear it. But we got just 30 seconds left before we head over to the match. in particular. I think we've covered a lot of the expectations of the jungle and the top lane synergy. But what about the bottom lane, Ejim? What can impact this matchup in your eyes?
I think bottom lane certainly Clutch favored. On the other side of the coin, we mentioned Edward earlier. I call it like solo invading, and that was me as a player as well. Like when you don't link up with your jungler, and his jungler is just a straight up baller, right? Like Ananasik is making plays on his own. It's hard to do that, and I think certainly does favor Clutch.
It absolutely does. Clutch are the favorites, but at least one of these teams will make it to the knockout stage. Quick stats. As Unicorns of Love and Clutch are ready for game one, today anything can happen.